we'll see how that works. But anyway, just wanted to thank everyone for joining us here today over lunch, and thank both Paula and Stacy and the Thompson and Swan Valley Chambers for helping put this on and coordinating it from their end. So my name is Ben Dewick, and I run a little company called Cantera Leadership. I launched it back in 2019, and I help leaders and teams and organizations become better at doing what they need to do by enhancing their leadership ability, their leadership potential, working with their teams, working with their leaders to try to help them be better. And when the COVID-19 crisis hit, I was trying to figure out how I could kind of give back to the community, to the business community. I'm a big fan of small business. I'm a former executive director of a Chamber of Commerce, and I'm currently on a board of a Chamber of Commerce in Niverville, and which is where I live. And so I had been doing some studying and some reading around kind of the material that I often use in some of my workshops. And I came up with a webinar, Leadership in Times of Crisis, which I've been offering to Chambers of Commerce, mostly I started with offering it in Manitoba, and then I've been also spreading it in other areas too. I'm working with a chamber in Florida that came across what I was doing, and going to be sharing this with them as well, and some other chambers. And really the reason why I wanted to talk about this is that this is a time in our business lives, but also in our lives that is, and I'll use the word that everyone uses, unprecedented. Years from now, people are going to look back on this time, and this is a historic moment. They are going to be, when we're all old enough to have grandchildren, or maybe some of us are already at that point, and maybe it's going to be great grandchildren in a number of years, they're going to be asking us, what was it like to be going through the pandemic? What was the experience like? And it is going to affect our economies. It's going to be affecting our communities, and we don't know how exactly. I'm hoping it's not as extreme as what some people are saying, but we don't know. And so as leaders, this is where we need to step up. The world needs strong, dynamic leaders right now more than ever. So we're going to be talking about leadership. This webinar, it's going to be providing some ways to help you become a better leader. And that doesn't necessarily mean only in your business, right? Because being a leader applies beyond only at work. It's going to be help us with our, at home with our families, if in our community groups, our churches, our organizations we volunteer in. So we're going to kind of be looking at it. We're going to probably talk mostly from a 40,000 foot level, but we are going to kind of dig down a little bit on some things, and I hope it's going to be helpful for you. I'm hoping there's kind of three things that we want to talk that are going to help, that we're going to go through here today. One is that we're going to encourage. Being in roles of leadership, especially during tough times, we sometimes need encouragement. Sometimes need a little bit of a, hey, you can do this. Second thing is educate. So hopefully you'll learn a couple things that you can take with you and apply. And also to inspire as well. So that's kind of the main goal here that we are going to go through. I also do want to recognize as well, we do have some people from the Flin Flon chamber here as well. Diane, thanks for that reminder. I had been told that by Paula that there was going to be some people joining us from the Flin Flon chamber. So appreciate that. And that they're contributing to this as well. So encourage, educate, and inspire is the goal. So before we go too far into kind of some of these, what your team needs from you, I do want to give a brief overview of kind of the state of leadership in our world, in our culture, in our society. Because of course the pandemic is only one of the many factors that we have to navigate as leaders. The pandemic adds a layer of complication, absolutely, but it's really only one of the factors. And so I'm going to just highlight some of them. I could probably have 30 different factors, but some of the ones that I think are key factors that we need to address, again, whether we're in business or in other areas as well. For example, right now, leaders are being called to figure out how to navigate the broadest generational gap that the workplace has ever seen. Right? That's life expectancies are longer, health is better. We have 5 generations in some workplaces. Now, that might not be exactly completely common because that oldest generation, which is referred to as the traditionalist generation, that's those born before 1946, there's probably not very many of those in the workplace. And this, I don't have that statistic here in front of me, but I know that statistic is pretty low. But we still have some of them in the workplace. And now we're going all the way down to Gen Z, right? And so that are entering the workforce. And interestingly enough, as I talk with business owners and with leaders, next year, for example, 70% of the workforce is going to be millennials. And yet when I talk to business leaders, many of them are still trying to figure out how to lead with millennials in the workforce, trying to figure out how to adapt to that. And yet 70% of the workforce is going to be millennials. And so it seems we're still trying to figure all this out. And that's not even referring to the Gen Zs who are beginning to show their presence. So we've always had challenges with a multi-generational workforce. I mean, it's not like that has just started in the last 10 years. It's been around forever. There's always been many generations. But the differences between the generations are even more distinct than they used to be. And a lot of that is due to societal changes, cultural changes, but also technology. 40, 50 years ago, technology wasn't as prevalent and dominant as it is now. Basically, people are, it's almost like babies are being born with iPhones in their hands now. And we have to figure out how do we adapt to that in the workforce. Now, as we try figuring that out, thankfully, there are abundance of leadership resources available. And that's a really good thing in a lot of ways. But there's also a flip side to that. So if you go to Amazon, you just search in the Amazon book section on, say, hey, leadership books. Over 70,000 results show up when looking for leadership in books alone, right? So that's not counting things like articles, webinars, videos, blog posts that are available for us to read. And so sometimes we feel a little bit lost even as to what do we read next, or what is important for me where I am at in my leadership. What do I need to learn next? And it's interesting because we sometimes view leadership as a science, but really it's more of an art than a science. So how do you even teach or learn art? Some of it is just experience, but some of it is going to be very different depending on who you talk to as artists, for example. And so we need to be even figuring out how do we learn for ourselves, but how do we teach? And we have a lot of resources, fantastic, but we have to navigate that. I'll talk briefly about a specialist economy. So some of these challenges are coming. Our society and our culture and education system has been really good and they've been doing this for good reasons, and it's been a very beneficial thing. We've been training and building up a lot of people who bring very specialist capabilities into the workforce. And they're technicians, for example, and a lot of these people that are specialists may not be trained or equipped to be leaders. And they often are then promoted from a technician role into leading other technicians. And that's, again, a really good thing. But then as leaders, if we are being promoted into that role, or if we are promoting someone into that role, we just kind of assume that they'll figure it out on their own. And it's interesting, in a book by David Epstein called Range, he indicates that specialists often struggle with some of the key things that we look for in leaders. One of the things that he highlights is the ability to solve problems. Because one of the things that we need to solve problems is this ability to bring in multiple perspectives in our thinking. And that's not to say a specialist can't do that, but we need to be able to help specialists if we are leading them, or if we are a specialist in leadership, we need to be able to get beyond a little bit of that specialist economy training, which has been fantastic because it's brought us a lot of great changes and innovations in our world, but a leadership role is a little bit different. We also wrestle as leaders, and I know I wrestle through this every day when I'm sitting at my desk first thing in the morning trying to figure out what I need to be doing in my business. But we also wrestle through that difference between being in reactive mode versus proactive mode. Right? We give into the tyranny of the urgent is the phrase that is often used. So we feel we need to put out fires rather than doing some of the things where we're investing in organizational health. Right? We get caught in working in our business rather than working on our business. Patrick Lencioni in his book called The Advantage, and I know many people really enjoy Patrick Lencioni books like I do, he says the single greatest advantage that any company can achieve is organizational health. But then he goes on to state how very few leaders do anything about it because they feel there are other priorities, other fires they need to work on. And yet that is what he identifies, and I agree with him, that if you're able to invest in things like organizational health, working on your business, you're going to start seeing transformation and growth compared to your competitors. So it is one of the key things that we need to figure out as leaders. How do we do that? And it's not always easy. Another factor, employee engagement. This is a huge one in today's business world, but it extends beyond that. Recent statistics say that just over 20% of employees consider themselves highly engaged in their workplace. So only just over 20%. They're highly engaged, and anywhere between 13 and 19% are actively disengaged. And the people in between are going through the motions. So if you consider that, roughly 1 out of 6 employees are actively not contributing to the success of their company. Now that's a little bit scary. And only 1 in 5 are highly engaged. Just imagine if we could improve on those numbers. It makes a difference in the world. In fact, Gallup, the organization that came up with these statistics, they estimate that it's costing businesses worldwide in the trillions of dollars, the fact that we have disengaged employees. That is a huge, staggering, and scary number. Now, I think, and most of us here are involved in smaller business. I think in small business, it's less likely that those numbers are as scary as they are in larger businesses, because it's harder to hide. But I still think we need to address that question, because even if most of our employees aren't actively disengaged, they may be in that middle kind of not really highly engaged in our organizations, and we can still look at ways how we increase their involvement and engagement in our organizations. A real positive movement that's been going on is a movement towards the focus on people and purpose over profits. Organizations are beginning to even develop positions in their organizations that show this. For example, in the HR world, there's a movement in how they put their titles around their roles. So instead of calling people an HR manager, they changed it things like, I'm going to be the head, your title is the head of talent and culture, or the head of people, right? A lot more personable, a lot more focused on, hey, I'm here to be a part of your team and engaging with their team members. I think that's a good movement. I think that we need to continue to look for that, because if you look at what the statistics say for millennials and Gen Z, they're looking for that in their organizations a lot more than in previous generations. And they're going to move around and find roles that have that at different workplaces. So if we want to increase our long-term retention of our employees, that's going to be an important question as leaders. And then, of course, a rapidly changing global world. I suggest this, or hinted at this a little bit earlier, with all the technology changes that we've had, right? And it's something that we need to figure out, how do we adapt to? Whether we're in Niverville or Swan River or Thompson or wherever we are, the world is becoming smaller. Even the fact that I can be talking to you over Zoom virtually is something that 15 years ago we probably wouldn't have even considered doing. Maybe even 5 years ago we wouldn't have considered doing very easily. And so it's exciting that gives us so many opportunities, but it also adds some challenges of leadership as well. And then, of course, COVID-19, right? We add that onto all of those different challenges, and that's only a small list of these challenges we have as leaders. It's like, whoa, now what, right? I already feel like I'm how does Bilbo Baggins says that he feels like butter, too little butter spread over toast. Like sometimes as leaders we feel that way, right? We're just a little bit of butter short of covering our toast already, and then we add additional challenges into our lives. Now, there was a study that was done by Gallup a number of years ago that I want to kind of base the rest of our discussion around, or the rest of our talk around. It was back in 2005 through 2008. Now, Gallup, most people know them as a polling company. They do a lot of polling in the US especially, and a lot of research. They do a lot of research worldwide in business and also in leadership. And really, a lot of people don't know they're a leadership development company. But back in 2005 to 2008, they did a formal study to determine the average person's opinion about leadership. So instead of going to the experts, instead of going to historians, instead of going to CEOs or celebrities or politicians to define leadership, they wanted real people to give real opinions. Not that politicians and CEOs can't be real people. I know we have a deputy mayor on, so I apologize if I'm trying to make it sound like you're not a real person. But they gathered information from more than 10,000 individuals and asked them to describe a leader that had the most positive influence on their lives daily, right? So pretty simple question. Describe a leader that had the most positive influence on their lives daily, and then list 3 words that best describe what that person contributed to their life. Okay. Then what they did is they compiled the 25 most commonly mentioned words, and then they kind of put them into buckets, is what I like to call them. And now, interestingly enough, when they compiled those 25 different words, the words like purpose, wisdom, humor, and humility, they weren't near the top of the list. Those are often things that we might consider should be at the top of the list. But what they actually came up with, when they came up with their 25 words and then put them in different buckets, is they came up with these 4. And they term these followers' basic needs: trust, compassion, stability, and hope. Trust, compassion, stability, and hope. So these are the buckets that Gallup came up with. And if you think of those 4 words, those are timeless principles that we have. It's not, and again, this was done in 2005 before COVID-19 was anywhere on the radar. So they're timeless principles that you can apply to your leadership. But now during a time like this, wow, they are even more important for us as leaders to understand how we can bring this in our leadership to our teams, to our followers, because that's what they have asked for. That's what they have said they wanted from us. If you're curious about this a little bit more, and we will dig into this more now, but if you want to read the book that the research was found in, it's called Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath. It's at the bottom of the screen there. A great book for you to consider taking a look at. So let's look into each of these 4 words a little bit. And at the end of each of the 4 words, I'm going to pause. We'll open up some time if people have questions or want to add some thoughts. I'm open to that, and you can add it in the chat as well if you'd prefer. And we'll pause and look at that. But I also will end each of the words with some questions for you to consider as processing for yourself as a leader. And again, this is whether you're in your business or in your families. I mean, hey, families want you to show trust, compassion, stability, and hope just as much as your businesses do, right? So some really good principles to consider. So trust, Gallup, the other words that Gallup put into this bucket were words like honesty, integrity, and respect, right? So it's such a huge thing that we want to try doing. And part of that is that we need to, as leaders, be leaders that our teams can trust, the people around us can trust. And that also helps us earn trust and give trust back. And it's kind of a cycle, right? We do it both ways. When we trust them, they trust us. And there's a little bit of that. As leaders, we have a higher standard in the sense that we need to make sure that we're modeling that we are trustworthy. So just as a reason why we want to do this, when we talked about employee engagement, so Gallup studied this as well. When followers trust their leaders, 1 in 2 are engaged. When followers don't find their leaders trustworthy, only 1 in 12 are engaged at work. So it makes sense, right? If you don't trust the person you work for, if you don't trust the person that manages you or leads you, you're not going to want to do as much. Now, there is a certain point where you're like, well, no, like as an employee, my personal integrity means that I will put the effort in. But it becomes a lot harder to want to, the more difficult it is for you to trust. So some of that has to do with follow through, right? As leaders, do we follow through? Do we do what we say we're going to do? Do we back up even what we say our company mission and vision and values are with how we act and how we talk, right? Do we when we tell someone that we're going to, let them have, grace if they make a mistake, and then they come and share a mistake with us, we jump all over them. That's not following through. That's not doing what we say we're supposed to do. Another part of it is empowering others, right? So we need to create conditions for the people around us to fully realize their own capacity, their own potential, their own power. That is what a trust relationship is built around, being able to give people those opportunities. Now, a big part of it is accountability, right? So are you accountable? It doesn't mean that you have to be like, always down, begging on your hands and knees, but accountability again, to the things that we hold valuable in our businesses, because that builds trust when that is there. Being human, authentic, and vulnerable. Vulnerability breeds trust. We don't have to be the ones to have it all together. And during COVID-19, we don't have to be the ones who don't say that it's hard. If it's hard, we can say that. Patrick Lencioni in his book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, I'll again talk about some of his thoughts around this. So he talks about trust as being able to know how someone will react in a given situation, like we've talked about. But he says, even more importantly, he highlights vulnerability-based trust for leaders to strive toward. So being open and vulnerable and building that foundation for your team. If you're having meetings, whether it's virtual meetings or in-person meetings during this time, be okay with sharing that it's a challenging time for you if it is. And maybe you don't find this challenging, but that will be an exception for most people. I think most people are finding at least something during this time challenging. So when I talked about some questions for you, 2 questions for you to consider is how can you be more open and authentic with those around you? And another good question, how can I provide predictability in my leadership during unpredictable times? And so what I mean by that is, even how you, are you available? That can be a big aspect of being predictable. You know, if people don't even know if they can get a hold of you, when they need to get a hold of you, or how to get a hold of you, are they going to be able to build that trust, that they trust you, that you are a trustworthy leader? So that's just two examples. Anyone, feel free, if you need to unmute. By the way, if depending on how much Zoom calling you've done, if you're on your computer and you want to unmute, a quick way of unmuting is if you just hold down your space bar. As you hold your space bar down, you are unmuted, and as you let go of the space bar, you're back to being muted. But if you have some thoughts around this, have you seen any leader around you do well with building trust? Or if you have answers to those questions, feel free to do that. Share those as well.
I can talk a little bit about how can we be more open and authentic. Even coming up to this long weekend, we actually did a chamber meeting, and one of our presenters was through mental health. And by the end of it, I was like, you know what? If you can't get a hold of me after 4 o'clock on the weekday and or on the weekends, that's on purpose. And so just, you know, saying it out there and saying you won't be able to find me, and that's good for me, and that's how I can be my best self. And actually that's because I also listened to this too. We've done this presentation before, and you just have to be real about it, because you need to be your best self when you come back as well.
Yeah. Good, thank you. I'll continue on. There'll be times that we can, we'll pause again, and there'll be some Q&A time at the end, or discussion time at the end. But again, you can use the group chat if you want as well, and I'll try to pause and take a look at that every once in a while. Let's move on to the next principle that Gallup found. It was that of compassion. So compassion, or some of the other words that Gallup highlighted, included caring, friendship, happiness, and love. Now, these are some high standards to achieve, but you know, these are important. It's important for us to get better at this. And it doesn't need to mean becoming a best friend with everyone on your team, but people do need to know that they're more than a number in your organization. Depending on how large your organization is, that may not be you directly with everyone on your team. If you have 100 employees, you will not be able to necessarily, you know, be connected to each of them. But even how you implement policies and principles, and how you empower your other leaders to interact and to share that core value of wanting to show care and friendship, even how you talk about your organization will express that. And we'll actually hear an example a little bit later as an organization that has done well with this. Now, Gallup has done additional research around this, and when people are able to respond to the item, my supervisor or someone at work seems to care about me as a person, if they are able to respond to that statement in the affirmative, they are more engaged, more productive, more profitable, they have higher customer engagement, and they stay with the company longer, right? It makes sense when they feel like someone cares for them at work, that they will be better at what they do. Now, especially during troubled times, we need to pour into the lives of those we lead. So this is where I'd like to challenge you to consider creative ways to show compassion and care, and to consider how you need to go a little bit beyond, or even a lot beyond, what you normally might show in this time period. So for example, if your team is meeting virtually, don't forget the power of taking time for being personal during those meetings. Even if you're not meeting virtually, ask people, how are they doing? If all of a sudden your meeting that was only supposed to be 20 minutes and 18 minutes of it is people sharing about how they're feeling right now, they probably need that. And that's okay. Maybe your meeting has to go a few minutes over, or maybe the things that you were going to cover in that meeting, you can cover them at a different time. Good challenge that I throw out to people, even if you've had to lay off your team during this time period, imagine how powerful it would be if you called up those people that you had to lay off during this time and checked in on how they are doing. That shows care. That shows compassion. When the time comes to start back up, they're going to be that much more excited to rejoin your team. They're going to feel like they were more than just a number, more than just someone that was doing work for you. I read recently of a company that is offering online yoga sessions and online cooking sessions for their team members to feel connected and cared for. Now, maybe that, you know, the example I heard was where they actually brought in a chef to teach the employees on how to cook something. Maybe you can't do that because it's, you know, might not be cost effective to bring in a chef to do that. But even if you would all do a recipe together, you know, a group, hey, let's do this one. We're all going to figure it out together and see how it goes. Doing things like that, doesn't need to be that exactly, will make a difference. You know, being personal is a really cool way of kind of taking that next level, right? It's different. You might be able to say, oh yeah, I'm going to give you something to show care and compassion. But what if what you gave was something that you knew they really appreciated? So maybe they have a pet, and what the type of pet, that it's a fish, dropping off some kind of special fish food. I don't know. I don't have a fish. I'm making this example up. But a dog, bringing a special chew toy, or maybe they really like watching a certain show, but they don't have streaming, they aren't streaming Netflix. Send them a subscription for Netflix. Come up with something that is personal to them. If they like tea, drop them off a tea package. Everyone likes chocolate, or most people like chocolate. That's a nice way of being personal to them. Have a handwritten note. Even if they're not coming into work, drop it on their front step with that handwritten note. They're going to feel cared for. They're going to feel that you are showing compassion. So be creative in how you show those types of things. Communication is so important as well. As leaders, we overestimate how much we communicate and how effective we are. Studies show time and time again that we are not as good at communicating as we think we are. An example of this, 2019, there was 181 CEOs that signed a document this is in the US, putting purpose over profits. Great document, a great thing to sign. Yet only 27% of consumers, not necessarily their consumers, but consumers, can name a purpose-driven brand. So lots of small businesses I know are very strong on purpose, right? We want purpose to be a part of why we do it. In fact, a lot of small businesses, the only reason they're doing what they're doing is because they have a purpose beyond it. But how good are you at communicating that purpose, not only to your customers, but to your team, that you are more than just a business about dollars and cents. You are there because of purpose. So how can we communicate with our team more effectively? When you are communicated with, you feel that people care for you. Just take any relationship. If you are if you have a partner or a spouse and they're not communicating with you, you feel that they don't care. So we need to be good at communicating. And again, we don't communicate as effectively as we think we do. Ensure purpose over profit. We talked about that a little bit. Another good way is implementing coaching conversations more. So a very brief explanation of a coaching conversation is this type of conversation that helps bring people towards success by focusing on their strengths and encouraging them to use them in their work every day. It's more about questions than commands. So you're asking them questions. You're asking what they need from you in order to succeed and how you can support them. If you can have those kind of conversations, people feel cared for. So 2 questions for you to consider. How can you be creative in showing care and compassion to those around you today? And how can you communicate more effectively with your team during COVID-19? I will pause here again, even just to catch my breath. But if people want to add some thoughts around this, they can feel free to do so. If you've seen a company or an example of someone that has done this really well with compassion during COVID-19, I'd love for you to share that. Or if you want to answer one of those questions, I'd love for you to do that as well before we move on to the next slide.
I know for myself, this is Sue O'Brien talking. I know for myself that we have a lot of young staff at our radio station here in Thompson. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them are from far away. From Alberta, we have 3 people from Ontario, and they're all living in apartments and they're on their own. And they've been finding it really tough, and then throw in the mix, they can't go home, and they're young and they're having even some, personal relationship issues, whatever. I know that I recognize that one of my staff was kind of having a hard time dealing with some things, and just to kind of try to help her with her mental health and stuff. A couple weekends ago, I just had all the females from the radio station come to my home, and we had a Saturday evening dinner. And I said, just come over about 4:00 in the afternoon, just come with yourselves, and we'll sit and visit. And I kind of anticipated that, once we were done with dinner and dessert and had some visiting and stuff like that, probably by about 8:00, maybe 8:30, that, they would all decide they wanted to head home. But we sat around, and it wasn't until about 11:30 when everybody finally left, because they were just needing a chance to get out of their apartments, get out of their little confines, and to be able to share stuff. Like, I mean, we were talking about many things that had nothing to do with our work and our shared relationship in that aspect. We just were talking about all kinds of silly things, and it really got them, I think, out of that space in their heads where they're thinking, oh, like everything is just kind of like I'm stuck. And I said to them, oh, you ever want to just get out of your apartment, feel free to come and sit in my sunroom. It doesn't matter. Like, I mean, you don't come bring a book and whatever, and just come feel free and sit there. So it's little things like that. And I think that's kind of how we've always tried to treat our staff. With a lot of the little things. Whenever we have new staff coming into town, it's kind of my mission to treat them like I wish people would treat my own 3 children. So I will make sure that we set them up in an apartment or help them find an apartment. I've had staff live at my house until apartments have come available on more than one occasion, many occasions, in fact. For those who don't have vehicles, I'll take them grocery shopping. We'll, I have a set time. I have my news girl right now. She's my news reporter. She doesn't have a vehicle. So every Saturday morning when I go get my groceries, she does that too. She comes with me. So it's little things like that. We try to, recognize that we have lots of people in our industry who come from away from where we are, and just, hopefully just try to make it a good experience for them and help maybe ease their parents' minds a little bit, that they're not coming to the back of beyond and that they're looked after. Yeah.
Oh, that's a fantastic example, Sue. And that's exactly the types of things, that if we're able to integrate those types of things into how we do things, especially during challenging times, then it becomes even easier once the challenges go through to keep doing those kind of things as an organization and build that culture, right? So that's fantastic. I'll move on to the next slide here. And if people do have additional stories to share, we can also have time at the end for Q&A around these types of things. But I do want to talk a little bit about stability. So stability, the words that Gallup added to that bucket are security, strength, support, and peace. So it's important, obviously, companies, organizations, we look at growing, we look at expanding, we look at, we're going to change over time, most likely. And so in all of that, whether it's positive change or negative change, stability is important, because any kind of change makes things seem unstable. People don't like change, and it's hard. Even if we like it, it still adds challenges to our roles and to our relationships. So when you think of stability and you think of some of those words, it's kind of the here and now is kind of what we're talking about, right? So how do we help people understand that they are going to be able to handle the here and now? How do we as leaders give them confidence that here and now is okay? And in a normal circumstance, that might be something like a stable paycheck, right? A lot of people think that is an important factor, and it is, even though it's not the most important factor that employees look for in regards to where they want to work. It is an important factor. But, COVID-19, maybe that stable paycheck isn't something that we can grab hold of, but there are other ways that we can provide stability. For example, crazy workplace drama does not provide stability for an organization. So is your workplace a place that is just filled with drama every day, where people, whether it's you yourself, that you might be viewed as someone who is not as stable as you could be, that you don't provide that peace, that stability in your organization? So we need to look at ways as to how do we not only address maybe that paycheck side of things when we can, or if we're able to, but also some of those other aspects. And I think a huge part of even that sense of stability can come with things like being transparent in situations, at least in a basic sense. Of course, there are things that the whole organization doesn't need to know, right? But when employees feel confident that they understand what is going on, they will feel more at peace. When they feel that they understand the direction of the organization, they're going to feel at peace. Remember, communication is vital in so many different ways. And if we're communicating about where things are going, for example, sharing organizational goals. What are our organizational goals? Have we adjusted our organizational goals because of COVID-19. Where are we in relation to our organizational goals? If you are communicating those things, people will feel more secure. And are you changing focus during this time? You might be, and that's okay. But the more you communicate it, the more regularly you talk about it with your team, the more they will feel like they understand, and then they will feel more stable. Also, tying in with them how their role contributes to that success of the organization. So often we just say, this is where we're going as an organization, but we don't have those coaching conversations where we're able to help someone to understand, this is how you actually help bring this to fruition. If we're able to share that, people will feel that support that they need to feel from you. So the two questions for you, one is, what is the rallying cry for your team during this time? And I'll talk about that shortly. And the second is, again, how can I communicate more with my team during this time of crisis? I use that term rallying cry, and I steal this as well from Patrick Lencioni, because he talks about that being a thematic goal, or identifying the key things that a company needs to focus on during challenging times. So it doesn't replace your organizational vision, but what it does is it gives you this unifying kind of thing that we can say, hey, it's a tough time, but let's rally around this. I think of, not that this is a perfect parallel, but I think of when Ray Bourque went to play for the Colorado Avalanche. If you follow hockey at all, Ray Bourque had played his whole career without winning a Stanley Cup. And so he went to Colorado with a chance to win Stanley Cup. And I don't remember the exact details around it, but the rallying cry that they used that year was around the fact that Ray Bourque did not have a cup ring, even though he was a Hall of Famer, and everyone knew that. And so I think they even had hats made that just had 16W on it, 16 wins. All we need is 16 wins to win the Stanley Cup. And the Avalanche were able to win the Stanley Cup, and Ray Bourque was able to get his ring. That 16W was the rallying cry in that time period. So do you have a rallying cry during a time like this where you can say, hey, yeah, it's tough. You don't ignore the hard parts, but you recognize that, hey, in order for us to get through this, and in order for me as a leader to help you feel like I'm trying to give you security, stability, and peace, here's the rallying cry that we're going to have as an organization, as a team. So what is that rallying cry? I'm going to keep us going here. I'm not going to pause now. I'm going to save it for some time in the Q&A at the end, just to keep us on a good time schedule. I've got the clock here in front of me. But definitely, if you have something you want to share, keep that in your mind, and bring it up when we have that time at the end. The next word was hope. We all like to have hope in tough times. It's really powerful. It's probably one of the most powerful pieces of being a leader, being an influencer. It's not, I wouldn't call it the most important, because they're all important, but it's very powerful. It's probably the most powerful in and of itself. Now, Gallup added other words in there: guidance, faith, direction. As leaders, do our teams feel hope based on your leadership? Do they feel like they have faith in you as a leader? This may be something that we aren't always familiar with or comfortable with. It's what this looks like, but yet it's so important. Stability is important, right? I talked about that. It's very important, but that's more on the moment. Hope is pointing towards the future. What does the future hold? The Harvard Business Review says that during threat or crisis, our first response is to narrow our focus, right? So we do this, we put these blinders on. That's a reaction that we have. But leaders need, this is what they say in their article, leaders need to intentionally pull back, opening your mental aperture to take in the midground and background. It is what we call meta leadership, taking a broad, holistic view of both challenges and opportunities. Properly focused meta leadership fosters well-directed management. I like Wikipedia's definition for hope. They say hope is an optimistic state of mind that is based on an expectation of positive outcomes with respect to events and circumstances in one's life or the world at large. So an optimistic state of mind. It doesn't mean that we aren't real still. We can still be real in what the challenges are, but are we able to still look towards the future with hope? Now, it is very future focused when we're talking about hope, right? As opposed to the stability, as I mentioned. It's being proactive versus reactive, right? When we're instilling hope, it's getting beyond the fires of the moment. It's being able to say, yes, there are fires that need to get put out, and at some point they need to get put out. But can I step back from some of that and initiate for what the future can look like? Because response is the easiest mode, right? I see that as a parent all the time. I respond to my children when they do things that I don't want them to do. right? It's very clearly defined when we respond. If there's a crisis, if someone is yelling at us, a customer is yelling at us, or an employee is yelling at us, our response mode is easy. It's reaction. Hope is harder to wrap our heads around. And we need to look at how we can do that. A big part of that, of course, is vision. Do we have a clear vision for our organization? Michael Hyatt, one of the gurus in the leadership world, he wrote this recently on one of his blog posts. And it's similar to what the Harvard Business Review says, but it says, during a crisis, leaders tend to hyper-focus on managing the threat and neglect long-range thinking. That's a mistake, because vision is critical both for evaluating short-term decisions and for creating a better future. He then goes on to say, when there's uncertainty, people look for leaders. That's true for nations, communities, and families, and it's true of your business. Everyone wants a way out of this mess, and they'll follow the person who can identify it. Wherever you are leading right now, people are looking for you, to you for direction. No matter what the current reality may be, they innately believe that something better is possible. Now is the time to lead with vision. So they're looking for us as leaders to step forward into this challenging situation and provide hope. Don't lie. Don't pretend there isn't hard things that we have to go through. Don't lie to someone and say, oh, I'll for sure have a job back for you when this is all over. When you don't know, if you don't know. But you can be, even how you talk about what you want to see, how you're working towards the future can give them hope. There might be something there for them at the end of it all. Not false hope, real hope. One of the things that you may have heard of before in different leadership conversations is having a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. It's a bit different than a rallying cry, right? A rallying cry is more to rally people around the here and now to give them confidence. But the BHAG is this big vision that you're all working together as a team. What are you able to bring people forward to? Because it can provide hope for what the future can look like. So some questions for you is, how can you instill hope into the lives of the people around you? And how clear are you on the vision of your company? Most of the time, the vision of a company is held very loosely, even by the leaders in the company, even by the owners. And if I talk to people down the chain in the organization, it becomes less and less clear. So if it's not clear for you as a leader, how can you make sure it's clear for you, but also communicating it to others? I want to share briefly, and I'm going to blitz through these a little bit because I want to make sure we have between 5 and 10 minutes for some Q&A and discussion at the end. Some great examples of some organizations that I feel have done well in this time period. I'll only share two. One of them is a big organization, Loblaws, company behind names like Superstore, Shoppers Drug Mart, Joe Fresh, and others. I feel like they've done a good job as a corporation in showing leadership during this crisis. For example, this is just a screenshot of one of the emails they sent out a couple months ago, right in the beginning of the COVID crisis. And they've been very good at communicating regularly with their employees and their customers. And I feel they've hit on all four of those components of trust, compassion, stability, and hope, even in how they communicate. I know it's hard. You can't really read that screenshot very, very clearly. You can look on their website. The website address is at the bottom. You can see how they've been talking about things. And I encourage you to actually look for the videos that their CEO has put out. Galen Weston is his name. His videos, even though how he talks about things, they've just been such a great example of leadership, in my opinion. So check that out to get some more input on it. Just in brief, here's some of the things that I feel they've done well with in regards to their reaction. So regular, compassionate communication. They were one of the first organizations, I know there's been a few others, that retroactively gave a raise to their employees during this challenging time. It's a temporary raise, but still they recognize that, hey, this is a way that we can support you as employees. They had clear action plans to protect employees and customers. They were one of the first companies to provide special hours for at-risk customers. And they were regularly providing confidence and hope while still remaining realistic to the circumstances. Now, I know we're probably not all involved in leadership of a huge multi-billion-dollar corporation like Loblaws. So I do have an example of a small business that I thought has done a good job. It's a business called Good and Natural. They're based out of Steinbach, close to where I live here in Niverville. They're a health food store in a small city. They're a family business. Because of the whole social distancing and quarantining that we went through, my wife and I were needed to get a product. And we often would drive to this store and shop in store, but you couldn't do that during this time period, as you all know. So we ordered online. We considered buying online from some other sources because we're like, oh, you know, it's simpler, it's cheaper, but we like small business, we like local business. And so we said, no, we're going to order from Good and Natural. Amazon doesn't need our support. Good and Natural does. Their price is slightly higher than other locations online, but that was okay. So we ordered this product. They sent us the product, and here's the packing slip, a scan of the packing slip. I blocked out my address just in case any of you are trying to hunt me down. But it says, thank you very much. Thank you so much for supporting our family business. This is what is handwritten on the packing slip. We appreciate you so much. Please find a free 30-day supply of vitamin D to help keep your immune system strong. Wishing you all the best, Leanne. Right? So yeah, fantastic, right? Well, this small act may not hit all the same buttons as what Loblaws did, right? Good and Natural did something above and beyond to help show compassion and even to help show stability during a challenging time. And we're going to continue to support such a great company. We probably would have anyway, but it definitely makes us even more excited about it. And we did actually order again from them a few weeks later, and they sent another packing slip with another handwritten note. And it looks handwritten. It doesn't look photocopied like it's, you know, just put on there from a scanner or something like that. It looks like it's handwritten each time. So fantastic example. That's the types of things that we can be doing with our customers, but also think of ways you can do that with your teams. So just a few things to kind of draw us towards a little bit of summing things up. You know, ask yourself, how are you going to show trust, compassion, stability, and hope in how you run your organization, even in how you relate to others around you, even in your families? Develop an action plan. You know, even jot it down. Like, don't be scared to actually say, this is what I want to do in order to do this. If we don't write it down, it's harder for us to actually implement something. Look at being creative in solutions. Develop some self-awareness for yourself in your own leadership and take intentional steps forward. You know, we each bring a unique approach to solving these types of questions and to answering these kind of questions, right? There isn't an exact formula that I can tell you on what that looks like for you. So understand what you bring to the table as a unique individual. Consider how those apply, the things that you bring to the table, apply to trust, compassion, stability, and hope. If you aren't someone who knits, you may not want to try knitting to show compassion, you know, knitting a toque for someone to show compassion. Look at a way that you are naturally gifted and talented and implement that into your approach. If you've never used the Clifton Strengths tool, I want to encourage you guys to consider using it. Now, I am a little bit biased because I'm a certified Gallup certified Clifton Strengths coach, but it is, the reason why I got certified in it is that I think it's one of the best tools to use for organizations and leaders for growth. It helps you understand yourself better, and it helps you be able to lead more effectively. It's used in about 90% of the Fortune 500 companies. It's been taken by over 23 million people. You don't need to even contact me to say, hey, Ben, I want to do this. You can go to the Gallup website. I get no benefit from this to tell you to do this. Go to the Gallup website. You can buy it for $27 Canadian. You can get your top 5 report that gives you a great report and a great way that you can use that as a tool for you to accelerate your leadership. And that is where I think you start to really, that self-awareness factor and how that unique approach looks for you really starts to shine. Some recommended resources if you are interested in taking further steps. The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. If you're considering a Patrick Lencioni book, I think that's one of the best ones to start with because it kind of covers some of his ones that are considered his most popular books, like The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team was the one that he really hit the big leagues in. He talks about it in The Advantage, the same principles. He doesn't go in the same depth necessarily, but it covers a lot of other things. Strengths-Based Leadership by Tom Rath. I mentioned that one already. The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. That E does not stand for electronic. It stands for entrepreneur. So whether you're in the beginning stages of your entrepreneur journey or you've been running in a business for a while, the principles in there are still amazing. Donald Miller, buildingastorybrand.com, a great marketing concept and principle that you can apply because people love story. And so the basic idea is how do you market using a story? And that's going to, I think, attract customers during COVID-19, but also after. And then the Clifton Strengths Assessments and Reports. Fantastic tool. So a couple of things just before we open up for some Q&A, and I'm totally good with going over 1 o'clock for anyone who's interested, but I do want to leave a few minutes for anyone who wants to chat before people have to take off. Thanks, Paula, Stacy, chambers that are all involved here, Thompson, Swan Valley, Flin, Flon. If there's others that I missed, I apologize, but I really appreciate this opportunity. Like I said at the beginning, I wanted to do this types of things to give back to the chamber world, to the business world. As a sign, another sign of appreciation, I'll be sending you a link that you can, via the email address that you use to register, that will allow you a chance to enter to win a free Clifton Strengths assessment tool through me and a free 30-minute coaching session with me. I'm only going to hand out one to the people who registered for this webinar, but if you want to, you can go to that, go to the link that I sent you. That link is also going to include a special discounted price that I'm offering for virtual Clifton Strengths team building sessions for you and your team. So if you're interested in bringing something like that to your whole team during this time period, there'll be details on that in that link as well. I think it's transformational, and again, I might be biased, but I also think it's transformational. I've seen it work, and I know it works for teams. And also on that link, and if the only thing you do is go to this link in order to do this, there's going to be a place for you to evaluate this webinar. I want feedback from you. I don't want to just keep doing the same things that I'm doing if I'm missing out on ways that I can improve, but I also want to know if there's things that you appreciated about this webinar as well. And so if that's the only thing you do when I send you that link, is click on that thing and go fill out that evaluation. I will appreciate that a million times more than anything else that you can do with that link. If you have any questions or comments, I'll leave it open for you now to kind of contribute some thoughts. I really like hearing some thoughts from the rest of you as well before we wrap things up from our time here. I've recorded this, by the way, too, so I'm going to send it out to Stacy and Paula at least. And if I'm not sure if Diane, if you're the best person, I could send it to the Flin Flon Chamber. You could forward it there as well. But you can gladly forward this recording to others to watch as well.
I want to say thank you, Ben, for doing this webinar for us today. It's really much appreciated. I know I've seen it once before, but I got more out of it today again. So it's great help. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks. Oh, there's someone from the PAW was on as well. So thanks for joining us, Andre.
Thank you, Ben, and to the Chamber of Commerce's, in plural, I guess, for hosting this event. And Ben, I've got 2 pages of notes, and I really appreciate all that you had to offer today. And I look forward to that email coming out with links that you are providing. So thank you again.
Thanks, Johnny. I appreciate the kind words in the comments as well that people have been sharing. I know not everyone has their microphone set up or chat works well for that too. So appreciate that. Thanks for joining us, Christopher, as well. Good. Good, and my contact info is on the screen there. If anyone does want to reach out to me, if you also don't get the email or for whatever reason you want to get in touch with me, it's on there. You should get the email from me as well, and that should give you my email address. So appreciate it, and let me know if you ever want me back, any of you chambers up there, for another workshop of some sort. What, did I draw over my screen here somehow? Look at that. Accidentally put some blue stripes on my screen. Good. Well, then I'll
keep us in the loop, Ben, if you're working on anything else or if there's anything specific that you have going on, because that's always good. I always enjoy hearing what you have to say, and walk with so much.
Thanks, Stacy. Okay, thanks everyone. It's good to meet you all virtually. Maybe one day it'll be face to face, but for now, enjoy the rest of your nice warm day, at least warm down here in Niverville. So. Okay. Talk to you guys later.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
All right, bye-bye.